If you're just starting out and you're not quite sure which hook goes with which yarn, or you want to make amigurumi in a different yarn, you haven't bought it yet and you're not sure if you've got the right hook, then this is a video for you. I am going to go through with you what hook I would recommend to use with what type of yarn, everything from super fine to really, really chunky. And what's more, you can pick yourself up your very own cheat sheet for free by clicking the link in the description and signing up to my email list. So we are kicking off with our crochet thread. Now, this is also known as lace weight yarn. And with this thread, you are typically going to be making things like doilies, home decoration, miniature amigurumi if you really, really want to go there. And it's great for making things like jewelry and smaller accessories such as hair clips and hair ties and things like that as well. This yarn is super fine and it is not for the faint-hearted. Crochet thread typically is cotton and you will need to be using a 0.75 millimeter, yes, a 0.75 millimeter to a 1.5 millimeter to get your stitches on point with this thread. Now, if you are thinking about doing miniature or micro amigurumi, you might want to stick on the lower end of that scale, so your 0.75 mil, to make sure that those amigurumi aren't holy and those stitches are on point. Our next yarn weight is super fine, and this can also be known as sock weight yarn or fingering weight yarn. Typically used, yes, you guessed it, to make socks, but also can be used to make home decor, accessories, jewelry as well, things for the little ones, and of course those lighter weight shawls. The hook sizes that I would recommend for this weight yarn would be anything from a 2.25 millimeter to a 3.5 millimeter. Depending on what sort of look you're going for, you could probably get away with a 3.5 for something like a shawl, or if you're doing some filet crochet work or some larger doilies or even mandalas. But if you are doing anything such as wearables and amigurumi, I'd err on the side of the smaller side of the scale, especially for those amigurumi works. I will just stress, if you're making amigurumi in any yarn, you should always go down a hook size to what the label says anyway. So we've had lace weight, we've had super fine weight, and this brings us to fine weight yarn. This can also be known as sport weight yarn, baby yarn, or 4-ply yarn. And this one is a jack of all trades kind of yarn, much like the next one's going to be. A lot of people use this yarn to make baby items, socks, shawls, accessories, hats, gloves, scarves. So it's quite versatile. And again, with this one, we are going to go for a 2.5 millimeter. So just 0.25 mil up from the last yarn weight, all the way to a 3.5 millimeter. Again, stressing that if you're making any sort of amigurumi, you should err on the smaller side of your hook anyway. And as always with any pattern, especially if you're making wearables, check your gauge swatch first. You might find that you're a bit of a looser crocheter or a bit of a tighter crocheter, and you need to go up or down a hook size anyway. If you're making a gauge swatch, this will tell you exactly what you need to know about what hook size you're going to use. Next, we come to our lightweight yarn. Now, this is probably one that most of you are more familiar with. This is also known as our DKs, our 8-plies, or our worsted weight yarns. This is pretty much the all-rounder of the crochet world. Comes in all the colours and all of the fibres as well. You can make pretty much anything with this yarn, from accessories to amigurumi to bags to socks to shawls to hats to gloves. The possibilities with this yarn are endless. And if I was using this yarn, I'd be wanting to look at a crochet hook size between 3.5 and 4.5 millimeters. I will say that with my amigurumi, I generally tend to use a 3.5 millimeter with a DK yarn, depending on the yarn brand, because some of them can come out a little bit thinner than others. If it's quite a thin DK, then I'll use a 3 millimeter hook as well. Don't forget to chuck a like on this video if you are finding this information really, really useful, and you can find your very own cheat sheet for what hook size to use with what yarn by clicking on that link in the description below and signing up to my email list. Our next yarn is our medium weight yarn. Now this is also known as Aran yarn, worsted weight yarn, as opposed to light worsted, which is what the DK was, and our 8-ply yarns as well. Again, Aran weight yarn is really versatile. It's a little bit nicer to use with those winter accessories because it's a little bit more dense in that fabric, especially once crocheted or knitted, meaning you're going to get a little bit more warmth. But again, it can be used to make a wide variety of things, everything from amigurumi to bags. Typically, Aran yarn, you would be looking for a 5 to 6.5mm crochet hook, again, depending on the brand. And if you're using things like cotton yarns, I know sometimes, for instance, the Drops yarns say a 5mm crochet hook with their cotton yarns, but I like to use a 4.5mm. This is just a rough guide, but with an Aran weight yarn, a 5 to 6.5mm hook should serve you pretty well. If you're making amigurumi, of course, drop that down a little bit if you need to. The general rule of thumb is if you can see any holes in your amigurumi, you need to go down a hook size. The next yarn is bulky yarn, also known as your chunky yarns, your craft yarns, or your rug yarns, and is the best place for making things like blankets, rugs. A lot of makers use chunky chenille yarns for amigurumi as well. As a general rule, on a lot of these yarn labels, the hook size will be anything from a 6 to 6.5 to a 9mm hook, really depending on what the yarn's comprised of. So our chunky craft yarns might have things like ribbons or fabric threaded through them, and our chenille yarns standardly say sort of 6 to 7mm hook on their labels. Again, if you're making an amigurumi, I find that anything 4 to 5mm works best with a chenille yarn, but check what feels comfortable for you. There also is a general rule of thumb that if you are using a hook that's too big, you'll get a lot of hand pain because you're doing the work to put the tension in instead of letting the hook do the work for you. So size down and see if that helps. Next, we have our super bulky yarn. Now this is also known as super chunky, or our roving yarns can come into this category as well. Great for making clothing, accessories, blankets, things for around the home such as bath mats and rugs, and your amigurumi as well. You will find on these yarn labels, the typical hook sizes are anything from a 9mm to a 15mm. This yarn is pretty huge. Again, if you are making amigurumi, you might want to do sort of a 7 or an 8mm, but bear in mind, you are going to get some hand pain from using these bigger yarns. So make sure you fiddle around with what hook size works for you. This is just a general guide to get you going and to make sure you've got all the supplies you need to crack on with that crochet project. And finally, we have our jumbo yarn, or our ultra roving yarn, or our hand knitting yarn, or finger crochet yarn, or whatever you want to call it. Typically, this type of yarn is used for making blankets, rugs, cat beds. There are people out there that would say it's easier to use this yarn with your hands or your fingers, or arm knitting with them. But you can buy crochet hooks for this size yarn. The general rule of thumb is anything from a 15 to 20mm, and these hooks are chunky. So bear in mind again that there might be some pitfalls from using this chunky yarn and hooks. That is all of our hooks and yarns for what type of yarn. There is sort of a rough go-to guide if you're looking for something for a project and you want to know if you've got the right hook for the right yarn, or if you're troubleshooting because your tension's a little off. You can go and try some of these different sizes that I've recommended to see if that helps you out with your projects. Don't forget, you can get your free cheat sheet by clicking that link in the description. Let me know in the comments if I'm spot on for you with these hook sizes, or what hook sizes you use with a particular type of yarn. New videos go up every Wednesday and Sunday. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.